Money matters, and if you want to get good at keeping more of it, you've got to get good at pricing. Fail at this and you'll find yourself out of business or with the company on life support. And you're wondering what you're doing with your life. I'm going to tell you how I found out that the hard way and show you the secret to pricing that will keep your business and your bank account growing. Now, at the end of this video, you'll get a strategy that I guarantee will make more profit than you ever have. First, let's go over the 3 biggest pricing strategies that cause businesses to be unprofitable. Number 1, just making it up and never reviewing it. If you've had the same pricing for years, you are due for a pricing review. And in this video, I'm going to talk about exactly how you can do that pricing review to ensure that you're doing it right. If you haven't done it in a while, you're probably leaving a ton of money on the table. And when you first set it up, you might not have done it right. So the second reason why businesses are unprofitable with their pricing is by pricing based on looking at the market price. So you look at the competitors, you look to the left, you look to the right, say, what are the competitors doing? And you just pick a number. Now, the problem with that is, think about it for a sec. Why are you letting your competitors set your price? They have a different position in the marketplace. They have different expenses. They have slightly different customers. Why would their price be the same? Unless everything is the same about the business and it's perfect competition in the world, you can't do it that way. So don't look at competitors to determine your price. You need to determine your price. Number 3 fail that I often see is being a discount providers. I want to say this very clearly. Low fees are not a marketing strategy. They're not a marketing strategy. So if you think that by having low fees, you're going to be attracting customers, you're just wrong. Unless you are really well capitalized, any kind of positioning that has to do with pricing is going to be a problem because it's a race to the bottom. So I've heard this very often, especially with a services company that might be like an agency or an accounting firm or a law firm, a lot of professional services type of businesses. They'll use this phrase, which I hate, and I'm going to tell you why. Big company value at small company price. Now, this is terrible positioning, and I know this because I started my career as a corporate lawyer, and that was my positioning. And what happened when I did that? I attracted the worst clients because they're coming looking for a deal. They're not coming looking for what I actually offered. And even though I was offering a pretty high-end service, I'd now stuck and trapped myself into this low-end mentality of customer. And we'll talk later about how I changed my pricing and the pricing perception that allowed me to really skyrocket what I was charging. And I'll give you actual numbers. What we have to understand is that low pricing is not a marketing strategy, and it's not even really a good strategy. So I talked about services, but what if you're selling products? Now, it's even worse when you're selling products because you have real costs. So I was talking with a small business. They were selling beauty products, and it was a small 2-person company. They just started out. They had under $50,000 in revenue. So regardless of what your revenue is at right now, they were a very small company, and they were taking on these generic products, these on Amazon, generic beauty products. Now, if you've got a ton of money behind you, you're well capitalized with investors, or you're just printing cash and you want to experiment with being a low price point provider, you could afford to compete on price and maybe make your 3% margin. But at their revenue level, and I'll actually say at most revenue levels up to 10 million, it's really not going to work. In their case, they were netting barely over $1,000 a year based on their early data, but barely over $1,000 a year. So what they had to do is they kept on putting their personal money into the company. In other cases, I've seen companies go into debt, sometimes cycling on credit cards, just trying to keep the thing afloat because the margins are so thin. And that is really dangerous. You're at risk of not just the company blowing up, but you pouring a bunch of money, a bunch of relationship capital with investors. Maybe you got family and friends investors to try to help you do this. It is a super dangerous thing to do when, if all you do is reconsider your pricing using the method that I'm going to go over in a second, and that will change everything. So here's how you should think about pricing. Don't make any of those mistakes I talked about. Here's how you can actually put in place a methodology to figure out the right price and make sure that it's always the right price going forward. This is the number 1 principle that I want you to understand that healthy pricing is based on value and not on cost. So a lot of companies will look at their costs and add them up and then figure, oh, I'll make a little bit more than that, okay? But I want you to understand that cost is an input and it's not a pricing strategy. Cost plus, you might have heard this, cost plus accounting. And sometimes if you're trying to sell to, let's say, a Walmart and they want to know exactly what your costs are, and then they're going to let you make a certain margin on top of that, that's what's based on what's called cost accounting. And that's not pricing. Cost accounting is an understanding of where your cost of goods are and what's going into it. That has nothing to do with what you should be pricing. And as you'll see in a moment, pricing has to do with the marketplace and what they will pay, not what you are paying. So if you're doing cost plus pricing, what you're doing, let's say that you're selling to a reseller and you're saying, oh, well, my costs are this and I'm selling it to you for this, exposing your costs to a partner or to your distribution channel just means that you're going to get crushed on your margins. So whether it's your labor hours as a services company, it's your cost of goods sold as a product company, your marketing costs, all of those costs, do the wrong thing. They're focusing on the price and it's letting your buyer take control of the discussion, because now it's a discussion about what it cost you to make it and what is fair for you to make. And that has nothing to do, again, with good pricing. So let's go through some steps and I'll take you through 1, 2, 3. What do you have to do to actually price well? Step 1 is to do what I told you just not to do for pricing, but you have to do for understanding your minimums. And that is to understand your real cost to deliver the product. That is the fully loaded cost. And I don't want you to just mark up those costs, because as you'll see in a moment, you'll leave a lot of money on the table, but you have to know what those costs are. So you want to know what the cost is to operate your company. You want to know what the marginal cost of each additional unit is. And now this is kind of going to set a floor. You definitely can't go beneath that, or else you'll be losing money. But you don't want to just mark it up a little bit, because that's not going to make you as much money as you could. And as I promised at the beginning of this, you're going to get a methodology where you're going to make a lot more money. The second step is to do what most businesses don't do, and it costs them a ton. And that is to work backwards. So instead of working upwards from the bottom, what does it cost? Now I want you to work backwards and say, what is the value to the customer? So you've seen what's the minimum you should make, and that has to do with your costs. But now what's the maximum you can charge? And the maximum you can charge has to do with what value you're actually bringing to the customer. And there are 3 questions that you can ask yourself to unlock this question and to answer it. So the first question to ask is, am I capturing the value that I'm adding to the customer? So think about, I'm adding some value to the customer's business, to their life. Am I capturing that value? So if really what the result of what you're delivering is giving them a financial result, and you can divine what that is, well, now you know how much value you're giving. If you're giving them a life result, and let's say you're selling B2C to consumers and you're helping them lose weight, you can also look at, well, what are the other options that they're comparing this to? It's like, I can lose weight this way with this supplement that you might be selling. And the other options, well, I can get plastic surgery, or I can go to a boot camp, or I can do all these things. And you're balancing, what is that value and what are they paying? What's the marketplace paying for all the solutions that are kind of related to this? Second question, am I not articulating the value that I'm adding in my sales and delivery process? Now, a lot of times, companies will just default to selling the thing. Here's what I got, instead of here's what it will do for you. So think about, if you're actually telling the customer, what is it going to do? Third question, is there a way that I can create even more value? And when you do this, when you ask these 3 questions, you're going to start to see that positioning as a premium provider, particularly as a small business, particularly if you're under $20 million in revenue, is going to be a huge impact. And this is usually the way to go. So I'm going to go back to my law firm example, where I started out and I was trying to do the whole big firm value or big firm skills at small firm prices. And I switched up how I positioned the value that we were giving. And I went from clients that would pay about $1,200 for a one-time project, and I was doing those hourly. And once we changed how we positioned it, instead of being this discount provider, and we went to a premium provider where we provided the best service. And it wasn't about the price. It was about how we delivered and how fast we delivered and the quality that we delivered. We went from those $1,200 for one-time projects to getting $30,000 a month guaranteed retainers. That's a night and day difference. $1,200 here and there, and now we're going to $30,000 a month in recurring revenue for doing the same thing. So what I was really doing was grossly undercharging at the beginning. But when I saw what the value was and I could articulate that value is there to be captured. And what's the other weird thing about this? At the higher number, at $30,000 a month, the clients were happier. They were paying for certainty. They were getting it before, but the kinds of clients didn't appreciate it. They would be scrappy with the bills, try to stretch payments because it was the wrong kind of client and the entire frame was wrong. But once we went to the higher numbers, all of a sudden they were happier. I was making more money. We had longer term relationships. I was able to do more because we had that revenue. So we could invest in better associates. So everything got better when we started pricing premium. So now we are at the point where you know two things. You know your pricing floor based on the costing that we talked about, and you never go under those costs, those fully loaded costs. And we also know your ceiling. What is the value you're providing? So you've got a bracket to work in. You can't charge more than the value you're delivering because eventually that's going to, even if you can get away with it for a while, that's going to crumble. And you can't charge less than your costs because the company won't work. So step 3 is to ask, what kind of margin do you need to make? So that's the third data point that I want you to have. We got the top, we got the bottom, and what kind of margin do you need to make? And that margin is going to be stacked on top of your cost. So when you think about that, you want to think, how much do I, as the company owner, with your investors, how much do you need to be paid? And that will give you your margin, and that's a minimum margin. So if you're thinking, well, I want the margins on this business to be 20, 30%, you pick your number. Now you actually have some information. You've done the exercise. Now, if you want to make more, here's where you want to push that number up. You want to take that margin you want to earn and you want to push it up. You have profit expectations for the business. And by baking in that minimum margin, you now know you have control over how much you're making. And now you can start tweaking things. And let's get into the fun stuff. So you can either change your pricing, you can change your costs. If you're trying to fit that margin, your minimum margin, and then go above it, let's say it's like, oh, your minimum margin is 25%. I really want to hit 30, 35%. So I can start tweaking things. I can say, okay, well, can I adjust my costs? Can I adjust whether that's the cost of goods, whether it's your cost of labor, whether it's your cost of shipping, whatever those things are. Or you can adjust your pricing, which means adjusting your positioning, how you're articulating it. So now you see that you've got levers that you can use to get to the result. Now, before I give you the secret to always increasing your profit, let's talk about what you're probably afraid of. And that is, most businesses that I talk with say two things. The first thing they say is, I can't possibly increase prices. My customers, they'd never accept it. I'd lose a bunch of business. And then what's the second thing they say? When they actually go through this process, they say, why didn't I increase prices sooner? So with those in mind, here's the easy button. If you get price resistance, it means one of two things. A, you haven't figured out how to express your value correctly, right? You haven't articulated correctly. So you're like me with the $1,200 occasional clients. You're going after lower end customers and you need to shoot higher. It means you need to change your marketing, who you're going after. And that can make all the difference. And that doesn't matter if you're selling services or you're selling products. There are always premium products. There are premium services, and they are much easier businesses if you can unlock them. There are very few instances where I come into a business and I find that prices are too high or they're just right. They're usually too low or usually framed in a wrong way so that even if the price is about right, the lifetime value of the customer can be greatly improved by fixing how the pricing is articulated. So now we've come to it. The secret to always making more, and it'll take you less than a day to put this in place. So I want you to pull out your calendar right now, and I want you to add 2 appointments to those calendars. So one is for this week, for the next 7 days. Sometime in the next 7 days, I want you to block out an area of time where you're going to go through the process that I just talked about and revise your pricing. Now give yourself a few hours to run the numbers, to have everything in front of you so you really know where you are. And then you can brainstorm, do I reduce costs some? More importantly, how do I express value better? So this is a critical thing. You can leave this video and do nothing, and it'll be just another thing you've seen, or you can actually get the benefit of this. And the benefit of this comes through this process. And that the first thing is book that meeting with yourself. Give yourself at least a couple of hours. If you're hyper organized and you already have your numbers, maybe you'll need half a day. But regardless, doing this is the first step. Second step, it's pretty easy. You're going to add a recurring 1-hour appointment to your calendar every quarter to review how your margins are stacking up. It's pretty simple. If you want to increase profit even faster, schedule reviews more frequently, monthly, or if after every deal you close. If you have really big deals, if you're closing larger engagements, every single time, you're going to do a margin analysis and you're going to look at that. Well, what were my costs? What was the value to that customer? What was the margin that I wanted? What's the margin that I got? I've given you a simple formula. And if you're still starved for profit, it's because you just didn't take the time to use it. Now, if you want to take the next step, there is a free resource for you. It's called the CEO Workbench. The link can be found in the top line of the description. You just visit there and you can get a whole bunch more resources and details about how to improve your pricing.